All right. So today, clarity, clarity. So I had to take a knee on Friday and for the rest of the weekend. I don't know what it was, but I was pooped. I was tired, mentally, physically, emotionally, you name it. I was just exhausted. And so I just took a knee and, and reached out to some people that I had some meetings with and said, hey, I just need a minute. And they were all so gracious. And I'm so appreciative. And I spent some time with my plants, which is still just so weird to me. I know Jerry's laughing at me. Y'all, I'm telling you, the girl who I can't do bugs. I don't do bugs. I don't do bugs. But I've got all these elevated planters and I've got cucumbers that I think are dying. And I've got peppers and I've got strawberries and I've got all this stuff. And it's like little children, y'all. I check every day. I check multiple times a day, which is just insane. But I do because I want to see what's going on. And so I spent some time in the garden. I spent some time rolling up all these water hoses that have been sitting on my cement for a year and a half or more. Just really kind of getting some things in order. And it gave me some time to be out, getting some real vitamin D with appropriate sunscreen, getting some real vitamin D, breathing fresh air, being with the trees, being just outside. And I needed that. And it came to me, this whole idea of clarity. And we talked about it last week in clarity and communication, how it's really important that you are clear. And sometimes when things don't transpire the way you think, we need to go back and see, was our communication clear? Did we really say what we thought we said or how we said it? Because communication is a two-way street. But clarity is bigger than that, because clarity is also important when we're having to deal with chaos, right? Really, really understanding what's going on and why and what we're doing and where we're going and all that kind of drama. And so, the thing I posted yesterday was clarity is momentum without resistance. Momentum without resistance. And what was interesting about that is when you get clear, the feeling that you have when you are really clear is incredible. It's that ventral vagal, right? We talk about the polyvagal theory. It's that zone, that genius, that joy. When you are clear about who you are and what you're doing and why you're doing it and where you're going, that freedom of that clarity is just unmatched. It is absolutely unmatched. There's a way to stand in that just has you standing 6 feet taller, right? Your feet a little bit off the ground. There's just such peace and focus in that. And so as I was out there with all my little plants, and I'll have to post something today of my peppers because they're really coming along, y'all. I started thinking about all this stuff that's happening with the CDC and some things about going back to work, whether or not to go back to work, how you get back to work, thinking about conversations I've been having with people in general, and then with clients, with potential clients, with other business owners around this issue and idea of what we're going to do. What do we do now? And if you think about everything that's been going on since this pandemic started, the lack of clarity in the communication has been the root of so much of this chaos. Is it real? Is it not real? Is the vaccine safe? Is it not safe? How many should you get? Should you not? Should you mask up? Should you wear 2 masks? Is it 6 feet? Is it 12 feet? So much stuff. Now, the reality is there's a lot about medicine that is art and not science, right? So the science is true about the vaccines and about how things work and all of those kind of things. There have been studies around virology for decades, right? So that science is solid. And the virus was new, right? It was a different strain. It was acting differently. It was manifesting differently in different people. It was new. And when you have something new, you use the knowledge that you have to approach it, but you also have to leave room. You have to leave room and flexibility for adapting to new data and new information. That's what's important. And that's what's an incredible piece of the scientific process. The scientific process does allow for additional data and information to come in and form the next steps or form the next processes or form the outcomes, right? Or the anticipated outcomes, the expectations of something. And so you can't be clear when you're doing something like trying to address a virus that we've never seen before, that has a foundation in something we have, right? It has a foundation in SARS, but it's operating completely differently. We've got to be open to different possibilities and how we address it. And yet, when you look at the general populace, and I'm speaking specifically to leaders here, and remember, leaders is about behavior, not about position. but specifically the leaders, and in particular to business owners and senior executives. When the communication is not clear, when there is not clear direction, when there is not clear understanding of expectations and outcomes, chaos ensues. Absolute chaos. People don't know what to do. And in the absence of information or in the presence of confusion, people will make assumptions and do what they know to do based on the best knowledge that they have at the time, which may or may not be good for them or you or anyone else. But because they're not getting clarity from you, they're not getting good information from you, they have no choice but to rely on what they know. And so that's what we're seeing, right? So now the US is opening up. I just heard this morning that New York is the next state to kind of open everything up. We're opening up. Don't wear masks. More and more retailers are now saying they're no longer going to require masks, which just kind of makes my stomach hurt a little bit. They're no longer going to require masks. And vaccinated people no longer have to wear masks. Vaccinated people. Here's the problem with that. You don't know who's vaccinated and who's not. And if you are a leader in an organization, you can't ask. Now, from a legal perspective, and we'll have to get on to Adrian, I'll have to bring him back on so we can talk about some of this as we begin to open up. From a legal perspective, some of that is the reason you can't ask is because it's protected health information, right? Somebody's vaccine status or vaccination status can be considered protected health information, which you can't just be spreading around to everybody. So that puts business owners and leaders, department leaders, in a really crazy quandary. So do we just continue to require everyone to social distance and wear masks because we want to demonstrate that we're doing everything we can to keep people safe? Do we require and mandate vaccines for you to return to work? Do we offer vaccines and incentives for people to get vaccinated as they return to work? Do we just say it's free for all and, the CDC says you don't have to wear them anymore, and we're just going to put you on the honor system? And we know how the honor system works, right? Outside of colleges, even in colleges. So there's this myriad of options that you have to choose from as leaders. Whether you're owning your own business, whether you're a senior leader in another organization, there's so much stuff that's out there that you then have to make decisions on because people are relying on you to tell them what to do, to be clear. And quite frankly, if you are running a business or you're in a department or you're running a company, there's also the additional risk management that you have to think through in terms of being able to demonstrate that you're doing everything in your power to keep people safe. Because somebody at some point is going to sue and say that they got coronavirus at work because they were told to come back to work. Somebody's going to do that. And whether or not it's true, and whether or not it's accurate, and whether or not it can be proven is yet to be seen. But that is coming because that's the kind of society we are, right? It is coming. And there are organizations who are being willy-nilly and not safe, right? And you kind of get the lawsuits you deserve, right? So, and then there are other people who are just don't want to come back to work. And so this is a way for them to protect them and everything in between. But the reality is that lack of clarity is what's causing a lot of the confusion. So no matter what you decide to do as an organization, as a leader for your department, for your company, for your life, it is important for you to be really clear on what you're doing and why you are doing it, right? Why you're expecting people to act the way they are and what your expected outcomes are and what your plan is to respond should something change.
Laurel,
yes.
Can we ask a quick question?
Yes.
Because this is something that just came up.
Sure.
Because Annette from New York.
Hi, Annette.
She said, stay safe, everyone. 8 New York Yankees players fully vaccinated got the coronavirus. But
yes.
Isn't it true that isn't it clarity that they did say you can still catch the virus?
Right.
It's just you won't get so severely sick.
Right. And so that was interesting. I heard that on the news this morning too, Annette. They are trying to figure out what's going on. The Yankees players, they're all vaccinated. And the virus has been kind of moving through the ranks of the Yankees players, and they're not sure why this is happening. Now, some people are saying that's actually a good idea. It's not necessarily a bad thing because it's actually showing the vaccine is working. Because to Jerry's point, no one ever said, let me rephrase that because I didn't hear what everybody said. Authorities never said that getting the vaccine would mean you would never get coronavirus. Just like getting the flu vaccine does not mean you'll never get the flu. What the vaccine does is it minimizes the impact of the virus should you contract it. It also helps to minimize your ability to spread it if you're asymptomatic, right? But the big deal is it doesn't say that you will never get coronavirus if you've been vaccinated. It really is to protect others and to protect you from the severe impacts and outcomes of the virus that's coming, right? So again, this is not an exact science. We know, and the scientists know, because I am not a scientist, the scientists who've been dealing with diseases and immunology, right, and virology for decades understand how these things move and are trying to figure out how this one moves, because I heard there's also some new strains coming out again. So it is morphing very quickly. And we also know from the science that one way to stop it is to stop the ability of spread, right? They stop the ability of the virus to spread, because the more it spreads, the more hosts it gets into, the more able it is to modify itself, right? That's just chemistry 101, right? So there's no guarantee that you will never get sick, but there's no guarantee of anything. Life is not about guarantees, y'all. Life is about risk management. That's what life is about. You do the best you can to stay as safe as you can to minimize the likelihood of you getting hurt or injured or ill. And should you get hurt, injured, or ill, you're trying to minimize the likelihood of the severity of that injury or illness. I liken it, we talked about this very early on when this started, wearing a mask. Wearing a mask is like wearing a seatbelt. Wearing a seatbelt does not prevent you from getting in an accident. What it does is minimize the risk that you will die from your injuries in an accident, depending on the severity of that accident in which you're involved.
Question from my hairstylist. So for small businesses or businesses, they get to make the decision whether or not they can still keep the mask mandate, or do they have to follow what the state is saying?
No, so every business is a private business. Businesses get to make the decision they want to make. Absolutely, period, the end.
Okay.
You get to make a decision. Here's why it's chaotic and why you've got to be really clear. People are going to want to understand why you're making the decision you make if your decision is contrary to some of the guidance from the CDC. So for businesses, again, because you have to protect people's information, if your decision is, we are going to continue to stay masked up and social distanced for the foreseeable future or until the fall, right? Whatever your time period is. And sometimes if you're going contrary, it makes sense to put a time period on it. We are going to do that because we are not mandating vaccines, because we know that there are people who either have not or cannot or won't get vaccinated. Or, we know that there are people who have compromised immune systems, or they're living with or taking care of those with compromised immune systems, and they really need to maintain as much safety as possible. And because of all of these things, and because we can't share, and yes, we're on the honor system, at least for the next 3 months, we are going to choose to continue to have masks and social distance inside our office spaces as we require you to come back to work. Should you not want to come back to work, talk to your HR person or whoever so we can determine whether or not there is a reasonable accommodation or we need to take different action or move forward differently, right? But that's why clarity is so important. You absolutely get to make the decision, just like you get to decide whether people are coming back to work or not, whether you're going to force it or not, whether you're going to give incentives or not, whether you're going to mandate vaccines or not. You get to make all of those decisions. You get to make all of those choices. What you don't get is to be free from the consequences, both intended and unintended, of the decisions you make. So you do the best you can with what you got, and you hope for the best and plan for the worst. That answer the question?
It is. So legally, we cannot ask for someone's vaccination card.
So that gets into a little bit of a gray area. If you are mandating vaccines, then what you can ask for is proof of vaccination. That may or may not be their vaccination card, right? So if you're mandating vaccines, then likely you are using an external vendor, a third-party vendor, which is probably the safest thing to do anyway. So you can then work with the vendor to find a way to say, hey, we just want to make sure everyone that is an employee has been vaccinated. And so they have names, they have, health information, and they can report back in a way that is protecting specific information to get back to the employer. So, can you ask for a vaccine card? You can. Should you? That's a different question. That's a different question. My advice as a former senior executive in human resources is you don't want to ask for that protected health information. You want to do something else that helps you to understand the population, your population, and how many are vaccinated, whether or not they're vaccinated, or you want to put things in place that enable you to be as safe as possible. I personally would not be asking for that information. If you choose to ask for it, you do need to make sure that your HR processes are such that you are keeping medical information separate from regular personnel files. Medical files are separate than regular personnel files. Please write that down. Do not keep medical information in your regular employee file. Do not. Additionally, you want to make sure you are limiting access to any kind of medical information to only those who need to know. So that would be your HR person. If you're very, very small, that would be your HR person. If you're so small that you don't have an HR person, I highly suggest you get a third party if you're going to be getting a medical information. Okay.
Let me ask this question. Does it discriminate if you're saying, okay, you don't have to be vaccinated? If somebody says, I'm not vaccinated, they just share that information with you and they come into your organization and they want to be a part of your organization. Can you tell them, no, they cannot work in that organization because it's a tight-knit place and we can't afford that?
So that is a slippery slope. And here's why. One, someone has volunteered the information, so that's great. You have to be careful how you use it. But you could be seen as being discriminatory if you somehow treat them differently than other people, especially if you just said, because we are not asking this information, we are going to make sure that we put protocols in place to keep people safe. So we're going to mask up and social distance. If you're already having people that are masking up and socially distancing, then why would you tell somebody they can't come work for you if they've revealed to you that they're not vaccinated? Because the information from the CDC says, if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear anything. If you're vaccinated, if you're unvaccinated, you still have to wear masks. So if you're having people wear masks and socially distance, then why would you discriminate against this person if that's the only thing, right? So it is just a very slippery slope to start making employment decisions based on vaccination status. I highly, highly suggest you consult with your HR person and your employment attorney, because these are matters that are fraught for litigation and are just, they're hard hurdles to jump, guys, because there's no black and white, right? You don't want to be seen as discriminatory. You want to keep your organization safe. You just have to be consistent. We've talked about that a lot. Consistency is key. Either everybody wears a mask or nobody wears a mask. Either everybody social distances or nobody social distances. Either everybody's mandated to get a vaccine or nobody's mandated to get a vaccine. Consistency. You've got to be consistent. And the reason I say consistent is not the same, and not you don't have to treat everybody the same, is because even in consistency, you still leave yourself room for reasonable accommodations. If you have people who are compromised and who are unable for allergies or religious reasons or something like that, they're unable to be vaccinated, then you've got to make a reasonable accommodation or figure out how you can make a reasonable accommodation that does not harm your business. So it's about consistency in your message, consistency in how you're treating people, consistency in how you're showing up, and being clear. You've got to be clear. Here's what we are going to do for this period of time for these reasons. People may agree or disagree, but at least you are clear what you're doing, why you're doing it, and for how long you're doing it. That's the point. And that's what's important about clarity, right? That's what's important about clarity. And we have seen the thing about this pandemic, guys, as painful and tragic as it has been, it has brought so many things to the forefront that we were just letting slide. It has really forced us to think about how we work and how we do work. It has forced us to think about how we treat people, how we engage with people. It has forced us to think about how we connect. And it has forced us to understand how to be clear and how to be consistent. Because with this confusion, finally, some senior executives are just as confused as the people who've been following them.
It's confusing.
It's all confusing. But leaders in the time of crisis get clear, and they get clear, and they communicate, and they keep moving, and they allow through that consistency some room for flexibility to respond to additional data that they may get. That's what great leaders do. Great leaders don't pretend that they have all the answers and that they're perfect, because they are not, because none of us are. But they do take the data that they have and make definitive, clear decisions and communicate those clearly with intent and with purpose, so that those who are relying on them for vision and mission and expectations and guidance understand not only where to go, but why they're going there and what they should expect. There is an opportunity to be clear in this chaos. It is possible. You just have to decide you're willing to put in the effort to do it. And through that clarity, there's so much more peace. Even if you're an organization, you have no idea what you're going to do, make a decision. Because I'm telling you, the decision not to decide is a decision. Well, we don't know, we're just going to wait. That's a decision. And what are you going to tell your people? We don't know what to do, so we're just going to wait and see what happens. Is that your answer? Now, it could be, but there are consequences to that too. Because they're relying on you to know. They're relying on you to make a decision. They're relying on you to do something.
We had to make a decision last week, and I said that's why I had to be careful not to be fearful about it, because we made the decision, hey, we've been in here, we know, no, excuse me.
Right.
Okay, hold on. Excuse that.
Wait a minute.
But anyway, it does.
Right.
So we made a decision to take our mask off because we both know we're fully vaccinated.
Right.
You said we cannot ask for the vaccination card, and something came to me and said, do you really know that Laura's vaccinated? And I said, well, yeah, she did on Facebook.
Right.
But nonetheless, there's a young intern that's here, and he's afraid to get the vaccination.
Right. But
the other young people that I have been fully vaccinated. But because he's not vaccinated, we continue to wear our masks. Now, I did make this suggestion to him. I said, it would be so much better if we could see your handsome face if you were to be vaccinated. I'm not making it a rule, but I am saying, because you're the only one that's not, we're going to make sure we're keeping you safe. And now he wants to go ahead and get the vaccine. No pressure.
Right.
But in order to be a part of the close connection here, people will make up their own mind whether they're going to do it. And as you said, leaders have to decide what is best for the team. Because we're on microphone, so there's a difference.
Absolutely.
So you've got to decide what's best for the whole team, not because of one person. But if one person has a medical problem or a fear, you have to be mindful of that too. And treat it differently. You do have to be mindful. And here's the other thing. When you make different decisions and you say, if you're vaccinated and you come into work, you don't have to wear a mask. If you're not vaccinated, you have to wear a mask. And you make it the choice of the people, even though you're not saying anything, you're actually revealing people's vaccination status. Because the assumption is going to be, well, if you're wearing a mask, that means you're not vaccinated. If you're not wearing a mask, that must mean you're vaccinated. So if you're giving people a choice of whether or not to wear a mask, right? And I'm not saying, hey, we're going to wear masks all the time, or we're not going to wear any masks. And there may be people who still choose to wear them. I'm saying if you go in and you say, for our organization, vaccinated people no longer have to wear masks. If you are not vaccinated, you have to wear a mask. If that's what our mandate has been, then the assumption of people is going to be, well, then everybody that walks in here with a mask on is not vaccinated. That leaves those folks open to hostility, to harassment, to discrimination, to, hey, we can't have this meeting. We're going to have to do this meeting on Zoom because, so-and-so is not vaccinated because they're wearing a mask all the time. Now, that assumption may or may not be true, because no one has to reveal their vaccination status at this point, unless you're mandating it, right? Or unless you're traveling and some countries are requiring you to reveal your vaccination status. But if you as a leader, as an organization, decide that you're going to allow people or going to tell people how they have to show up depending on their vaccination status, then you need to be prepared for the backlash of that and the outcome of that. You need to be prepared for people to say, you know what, now they're not inviting me to meetings. I'm supposed to be on this project. Nobody's giving me information. And I think it's because they know I'm not vaccinated. But is it illegal? And you said, private businesses can do that. So
there's a difference between illegal and discriminatory, right? So is it illegal for a business to say, if you're vaccinated, you can wear, you don't have to wear it. And if you aren't vaccinated, you have to wear one. It's not illegal. It's following CDC guidelines, but it's not necessarily the wisest thing to do, because it can lead to hostility, discrimination, harassment, all those other unintended consequences in your organization. So again, it's your business, especially if it's privately held. It's your business. You can do what you want to do. You just need to be prepared for the outcome of that. You can do what you want to do as long as it's not discriminatory and as long as it's not illegal. It is not illegal at this point in time to require people to wear a mask or to say you never wear a mask. There was a business in my hometown that was like, that actually put a sign out that said, how they put it, and I'm gonna get this wrong, Mara's online, that said something like, don't wear your face diaper in our business.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, you know what? You just lost my business.
Wow.
Now, there are enough people that have that same sentiment that organization would just be fine. But that was just nasty and ugly and uncalled for. So you just got to know who you are, where you are, what you want, and where you're going, and act accordingly. And be prepared to manage the risks around the decisions that you make. So the decision itself is not simple, but what you have to do is pretty simple. You got to make one, and you got to be prepared to uphold it and deal with whatever kind of fallout happens. That's what leaders do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you got to be prepared to make changes if necessary. But this chaos and this confusion, because there is a difference in how you can live, is difficult. And the reality is this: there are a lot of people that are going to lie. There are a lot of people who didn't want to wear it in the first place and who don't want to be vaccinated, who are like, well, who's going to know? They're not going to ask me. It's one of the reasons that those who are vaccinated as well, or those who are not vaccinated for reasons that are beyond their control, may still choose to mask up, glove up, all that kind of stuff. Again, depending on where I'm going, you will probably still see me in a mask in some places because I don't know you and you don't know me, right? And so for the safety of other people that I have around me and my family who have some compromised situations, I'm probably still going to mask up in some places, at least till the fall, till it gets cold again, right? And we might be able to kill off more of this virus because the heat is a spreader. So, you've got to be really clear. So individually, you've got to be really clear. What do I need? What is my situation? How am I going to show up? If my organization is requiring a vaccine or requiring masks or requiring whatever, how do I feel about that? Am I ready to do that? What is my worst case scenario? What is my plan? Because if I can't go along with that, then I've got to make a plan to do something different in order to continue to support my family or do whatever it is that I have on my goals. If I'm running a business, how am I going to manage that and still be able to run my business now that the guidance has been updated and is a lot confusing? It's the same thing in this clarity. I saw somebody post it today and I'm like, that is so true. We talked about it last week, this whole rhetoric around how, because that's the other thing that's happening in Texas, the additional monies for unemployment are going away at the end of the month, I believe. Because there's all this rhetoric that we can't find people because they're getting too much money on unemployment. Nobody's getting rich off unemployment. Trust. I think I heard, $800 a week was the high. That's not a lot of money, folks. It's just not a lot of money. Not given the prices of things and putting food on the table and gas in your car and all these kind of things. That's not a whole lot of money. So people are not, there are fringes, right? There are people who are probably making more money on unemployment because they weren't really working, right? So you have a faction of those. My argument is that that's probably a very, very small percentage. The bigger issue, and this is where it gets to being really clear, being clear with yourself and owning your own stuff, business owners, owning your own stuff. It's not that people are they don't want to work because they're making more on unemployment. If they're getting $800 a week in unemployment, but they come back to work and you want to pay them $250 an hour plus tips, you're asking them to make a financial decision. So instead of blasting the person that is trying to support themselves and their family, how about you look at your pay structure? How about that? Right? If you are still at $7.50 an hour, how about that? How about that? Right? So it's that leaders own their own stuff, y'all. So are there people who are making the decision that, hey, it's just better for me to get these benefits because, I'm making more money doing that. There are probably some, but to spread peanut butter and say the reason we can't find workers, and that's what you're hearing, is that the sole reason we can't find workers is because they're making too much on unemployment. That is a political argument. That is a political argument. That is not a societal argument. That is not dealing with the reality that we've got disparities in compensation and in economics. And some of those are tied to wage rates. Period. The end. Full stop. That's just the truth.
Yeah. And the fact that some schools are still closed. So mothers, because they said most of it is coming from women.
Absolutely.
And so it would cost them to go to work trying to
Absolutely.
find childcare.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot that goes along with
There's
that.
a lot that goes along with that. So instead of spreading peanut, so today, before you fix your mouth to say, I can't find somebody because they're getting more on unemployment, I would ask you to pause. Ask you to pause and look at the population that you are hiring and the socioeconomic impacts of this virus on that group that you are hiring, and then decide what may be the challenge. And can you go back? We talked about it very early. What are some things you can do? Even before they talked about the PPP, we talked on this show about, can you go back and look, instead of cutting jobs, can you cut pay and keep everybody employed? So at least they're getting something, right? Those same kind of decisions can be made now as people are coming back to work, as you're needing people to staff your restaurants and to staff your businesses. Can I need to hire people. Do I hire more people, right, at a lower rate? Or do I raise the rate and hire fewer people? Or do I actually, instead of trying to make 75% profit, maybe I'm okay with 50% and I can actually pay all the people I need to hire more money? And I say that not passing judgment, because you have to make the decision you need to make for your business. What I'm telling you is you got to own that decision. You got to own that decision and be honest with yourself and everyone else about the decision you're making and why you're making it. That's what clarity is. Clarity is about understanding who you are, where you are, what you want, and what you need to do to get there. And even around what you need to do to get there, what are you willing to do to make it happen? What are you willing to do to hire people? What are you willing to do to keep people employed? What are you willing to do to find your next job? What are you willing to do to go back to work? What are you willing to sacrifice, right, to do that? Are you willing to sacrifice some profit in order to employ the number of people that you really need to employ? Are you willing to re-evaluate and re-engineer processes and products? Because through the re-engineering, you might actually be able to regain some profit as opposed to through cutting salaries. What are you willing to do as a business to support? And only you can make that decision. But you've got to be clear. You've got to be clear with you first before you can be clear with anyone else. The same thing in a career. If you are in a situation where you're like, you know what, we are making a decision as a family if both of us are going back to work because we got this daycare issue. You guys have got to get really clear with yourselves and with your family what you want and what it's going to take to get there, and make a plan. The challenge we have around clarity sometimes is we get caught up in the ultimate outcome, and we don't enable ourselves to sit in being really clear, because when we're really clear and we know where we're going and we know what we want, then even those detours along the way, if we can keep that clarity in mind, they don't become derailers. They're simply changes in directions or modifications of process. They're not complete derailers. The challenge we have is sometimes we get so caught up in how we're going to get something done that we forget about what the ultimate goal is in the first place. And the ultimate goal, that what, right, is not necessarily in the how, because the what's along the path can change. So you keep your how going so that you understand that you might need to morph and might need to change so that you can get to the ultimate what. I want to be able to run my business at full capacity. I want to make sure that I have every seat filled again. I had to decrease my population, but because I decreased my population during the pandemic, I've been able to reset some processes, and we're actually much more efficient. So I may actually now be able to invest in that new product I want to put out, which means I need new people with different skills. Give yourself the opportunity and the grace and the gift of taking some time to figure out what it is, to get clear. Because if you're not clear, you can't expect people around you, working with you, connecting to you, buying your stuff to be clear. That's one of the things in marketing, all my marketing experts, right? They're like, you got to be really clear. Confused mind never buys. Whether it's a product or a process or a service, a confused mind never buys. So we spend all this time getting really clear for our customers because we want our customers to buy our stuff. But we don't tend to spend the same amount of time getting really clear with our employees, or getting really clear with ourselves, or getting really clear with our families, or getting really clear with where we want to go and how we want to go. Well, we're really clear with that customer because we want to open the checkbook, pull out the credit card, give us their Venmo, right? We owe that same level of clarity and conviction to ourselves and to our employees, to our team members, to our family members, because through that clarity, we get to that peace and that understanding of where we're trying to go. And then we can all get on the same page to get there. And you give more room in that clarity of goal, of where you're going. Once you get that clarity, it gives so much more room for the differences in approach. Because you're all going in the same direction, right? You're all going to the same goal. You just may have different approaches. And it gives so much more room for those different approaches when you're clear on where you're going and why you're going there.
Lauren, when you talk about that, because I'm thinking about a lot of people were saying it's because of the unemployment and people are making more money and all of this. And let's say, and Annette had talked about the pandemic, about we'll know in 2 weeks if the numbers go up.
Right,
right. So won't we know that even with because I see Governor Abbott has passed it where the unemployment insurance is going to end, the extended government employment insurance is going to end. So won't we know if people return back just because the unemployment ended? Because some people literally just are not going back because they pivot, as we said.
Right.
They've made a decision they want to do something different. One restaurant on the news said they decided to hike up their increase to $15 an hour, and some people came back and some people still didn't come back.
Right.
So won't you know by that?
Well, and that's the thing. That's why I said we got to stop spreading peanut butter.
Yeah.
Because yes, it's socioeconomic, but the other thing is, and they've talked about this as well, there are people that made a decision during this pandemic to do something else.
Yeah.
Some people went back to school. Some people got additional certifications. Some people changed industries. Some people made choices not to come back. And so we cannot just say that the root of all evil was we gave people more money and unemployment. Nobody's getting rich off of unemployment, folks. Nobody's getting rich off of that, if that's your issue. Because I know a lot of people are like, well, they're getting rich off of unemployment. And that's our taxes and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, whatever. Right? That was probably not sensitive. I don't apologize.
Your perspective.
It's my perspective. It's the Rutledge perspective. But the reality is people made choices during the pandemic because we had time to think about stuff.
Right.
we actually, not only did we have time, we didn't have choice because everybody was sent home, right? Or a lot of people were sent home. We had choices and we had to make those choices. And we got a chance to have some downtime to really think about what we were doing and why we were doing it. And we got the opportunity to see people's true selves. Because when there's chaos, when people are uncomfortable, when they feel in danger, when they feel unsafe, that is when their true, that comfort behavior comes out. They're not necessarily managing the ugly because they're just in survival mode. So remember, I always say people will hear what you say, they believe what you do. So during this pandemic, how organizations, how leaders treated people, they remember that. And those who had to go home anyway and were working at home, that was a great time. I'm working at home. It's a great time for me to be doing my classes. It's a great time for me to be looking for another job. It's a great time for me to be doing these other things, getting reconnected with my family, making some different decisions. Because I'm not in the office with somebody looking down my throat all the time. I have more freedom working at home. Some people's decision was, I absolutely still want to work, but I am not going to go into an office every day. And I am willing to take the chance to find a place where I can stay remote because that works better for me and my life. And that means I can actually take a job that I love that may pay less money because we don't have daycare issues and all these other kind of things because one of us is at home working. We can manage some other things. That flexibility doesn't mean I don't want to work. It just means the flexibility is really important to me. And I can manage the other things we need to manage, which means the pay rate isn't nearly as critical as it used to be.
Can we say on the flip side of that, what about a business? Because I just had this scenario come up. We're doing a production and reached out to a local artist, and their rate was extremely high. And I normally don't say people's rate, that's your rate,
Right.
that's your rate, but it was extremely high, but considering a national artist was
Right.
was different. So even in a business, and people are coming back with businesses, and you haven't worked. Let's say you haven't worked,
Yeah.
and you haven't been booked to do anything, and you had no shows, but
Right.
here's somebody offering you something, and it's good.
Yeah.
It's maybe not what you got before the pandemic,
Right.
but it's
Right.
beginning, because all businesses have to regroup. They have to
Right.
rebuild and get money to
Right.
start coming in. So what do we say to that? Because there may be some people who are saying, well, I don't want to work for that, when they really need to work.
Right.
So they're looking for the business to give them all this money.
Right. So there are a couple of things. One, not all money is good money.
Okay.
So be careful about the money you're chasing, because when you're chasing the money, interesting things happen. Two, there are businesses that are like, oh, it's finally opening up. We're going to try to get every piece of money back that we lost during the pandemic. So there are businesses that are doing that. There are businesses that are trying to recoup everything as quickly as they can, because they're not thinking about the unintended consequences when so many people do that, right? There's an impact on the economy. If every business now decides, good morning, Fee, if every business decides, we're going to try to get everything back now, that's an impact, right? That cost is an impact. You look at the airline industries. People would think now, oh, I should be able to get some cheaper flights, which during the middle of the pandemic, you could. Those airline tickets now are insane.
Really?
They're starting to be insane because they've been down for so long. You know, oh, travel's picking up. Travel's picking up. Not where you was, but it's picking up. And we don't know when business travel is going to come back. So we're going to have to figure out how to make more money with all of the casual travelers. Right? So there's the not all money is good money. There's the, you know, we're going to try to get everything back. But here's the thing. People will listen to what you say. They will believe what you do. And yes, there were some surcharges that were added during the pandemic because restaurants who had to deliver now instead of just being in house, they had to buy lots of disposable stuff instead of being able to just wash the dishes that they used. You know, there were a lot of things that they added surcharges. Is it time for you to decide that your surcharge can go away? Or if you're still doing a surcharge, are you using the surcharge to help support an increase in salary now to bring people back? You know, it's the same thing about money. Why are you doing what you're doing? And if somebody calls you on it and asks you about it, what are you going to say? Now, your answer could always be, that's the price I want to charge. And that is just fine. You have the prerogative to do that. And people have choices.
Yeah, they do.
They have choices. And so their choice may at that point be, oh, you know, I get that. That is just not an investment I'm willing to make right now. So I will go find what I need somewhere else at a price that for me is more reasonable at this point in time. So, you know, money is an interesting thing. It is a challenge. It is emotional. It can be political. It is difficult to decide. It's difficult to manage. It can just cause all kinds of challenges. At the same time, money's easy. Money's easy. When I was recruiting people and we started talking about salaries, or when I was working and doing performance management or having conversations with people and they come to me and there's, you know, all this stuff is wrong and saying, I just don't make enough money. They don't pay me enough for this. Every time somebody started talking about pay, I put it in a little bubble and I set it aside. And I said, okay, now let's talk about what's really going on. And the reason I did that is because money's easily fixed. You can always throw more money at somebody. I'm not talking about whether or not it's a good or bad decision. I'm just saying the practical reality is you can always add more money. Always. You can always change a bonus structure. You can do all that kind of stuff. That is easy. That is an easy fix. But generally, when people start talking about money, there's so much other stuff that's a problem. And oh, by the way, I don't make enough money. Businesses, you're saying we can't find enough people. We got to have more people. We got to find enough people. We can't find enough people. We got to find people. Why aren't people working? People aren't getting enough. See, some of that is about the money. Some of that's about the money. Some of that may be about how you treated people before they left.
Mm-hmm.
Who you decided to fire, who you decided to retain, whether you decided to furlough or whether you decided to do full layoffs. And because the money is an easy fix, are you looking at your finances and can you, like this one restaurant, up your wage rate and just take it out of your profit somewhere else? You have options, you have choices. Not all of them are great, not all of them are long term, not all of them are reasonable at the time, but you have choices. And it is incumbent upon you to go and explore what those choices are so you can make the right one for your situation at the time. It's incumbent upon you as a leader to do that. It's the same thing if you're making a personal decision about your career. Are you going to go back or are you not? What salary are you going to take? How are you going to take that salary? Are you not going to take a salary? Right? All of those things are there. And as my dad just told me when buying a car, right? I need you to be ready to leave that car on the showroom floor. You need to be willing to walk away. You can't fall in love with the car. We can't fall in love with the jobs. We can love what we do. We can be passionate about what we do. It can be that thing that makes our soul sing. But when we fall in love with the job, right? That place we go to work, and we become enamored with that, with the title, with the money, with the prestige, it leads us to make decisions that aren't necessarily the best for us in the long term. Or it leads us down a path where when all that stuff goes away, we don't know what to do because we don't know who we are, because we've tied everything we are up into that thing. And that's why it's important to be really, really clear about what you're doing and why you're doing it. Sometimes we are in a position where, you know what, this is the amount of money I need to make for this period of time because this is what I'm doing. And that's okay. At least you know. And because this is the money I need to make, I'm willing to take something that's not as ideal because the money is right for this period of time. And that's okay. I'm all about you make the decision that you feel is right for you. Hopefully that does not hurt someone else. I'm not okay with you hurting other people, right? But you do what you need to do for you. And then own that. Just like you need to own your opinion if it's contrary to fact. Have some clarity, decide what you want to do, make that decision, be prepared for the outcomes, good and bad consequences. Be prepared to get more data and make a different change, make a different decision. It's all okay. It's called living. It's called living. Nothing stays the same. What's that song? Everything must change.
Everything must change. Michelle Johnson said, I was taught it is not how much money you make, it's how you manage it. That's true.
That is true. That is true. Because there are people who make very little and do much more than those who make a whole lot. It depends on where what your priorities are.
Yeah.
Depends on what your priorities are. Because if you think about it, you see it all the time. The people who truly make a whole lot of money, I mean, really rolling in a lot of money, they don't wear their money.
There it is.
They don't drive their money. They don't necessarily live in their money. Now, they may have their one thing, right? Like they really love, St. John's suits or something, which are really expensive, right? Or their dream car was a whatever, right? Some kind of Bentley. And so they may do those kind of things. But they're not, the reason they have it is because they don't spend it like they have it.
They don't want nobody begging.
Right. Right. Lots of family comes out of the woodwork.
Yes,
Lots of family comes out when and friends and all this kind of stuff. So really, really, really get clear. If there's one thing I can say today, I just, clarity is so important. There's so much freedom in that. And people are looking to you to be clear. The guidance we have right now in this pandemic is not clear. It's just not clear. And it seems to be changing every day, right? It's not clear. And it started out as a hot mess, which is why it's not clear, why it continues to be unclear.
Dr. Cynthia just said earlier, she said, I believe that real clarity only comes from God. And that is true. But let's say everybody is not connected to God and everybody's not. How does the leader get clarity and navigate an organization or a country or a city? Where does that clarity come from? Let's say they're not believers. Where does that clarity for them come from?
A big piece of clarity is silence. So you need to be still and really be honest about what you're trying to do and where you're trying to go and why. And you need to listen. And you need to listen actively. Because people will tell you what they're not clear about. You will hear it through their statements. You'll hear it through their questions, right? You'll see it through their action, because remember, listening actively is not just with your ears, but you're listening for body language. You're listening to what people do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just what they say. That's what active listening is. So clarity is around not just you, although it starts with you, really understanding who you are, where you are, what you want, and what you're going to do to get there. But also those around you who are going to be impacted or who you're relying upon, listening to them. Where are they confused? Why are they confused? Do they even realize they're confused? Because sometimes people are so convicted about what they know, and it's like, ooh, that's not where we're going. But the reality is, you weren't clear with them. So they are truly convicted because that's what they thought they heard. So that clarity starts with the individual and then spreads to listening, and then ensuring that actions and words are aligned. Because when actions and words are misaligned, that eliminates clarity. That supports additional chaos. Because people will listen to what you say, but they will believe what you do. And if they are not aligned, they're always going to go with the action. And if your action is not aligned with what you said you want, you're not going to get what you said you wanted, because your actions don't align to that. So clarity starts with self-awareness, some grace, some self-accountability, and some willingness to be vulnerable, the willingness to be humble, willingness to listen, and setting the ego aside. You got to set the ego aside if you really want clarity. Because sometimes what you get clear about is not what you understood and not what you wanted, but is what you needed. And if you're clear, and if you're willing to surrender and to sit in that flow, then that clarity, even if it's not what you expected, gives you a level of peace and connection that is beyond. All right.
That's good.
Thank y'all. Thank you for joining today. I enjoyed having you on. I will remember, I was so bad last week. Like I said, I had to take a knee last week. I will go back and comment on all of your comments. Thank you for joining in. I am just truly humbled that you choose to spend time with me today. Parker, I see you. Michael, I see you. Jenny, Fee. We heard from Cynthia. We heard from Annette. We heard from Michelle.
Gerald.
He's
a new listener.
Oh, hi, Gerald. Thank you for tuning in.
And Michelle Johnson.
Thank you, Michelle.
D. Perez.
Hi, Dee. Thank you all so much. I appreciate that you spend this time with me every Tuesday. I enjoy being here. As always, please let me know. If there's something else you want me to talk about, just send me a DM, put it on my Facebook page, tell Jerry in her Facebook page, just let me know. We can talk about other stuff too, but I always try to bring something that's going to make you think, that's going to give you grace, give you peace, and give you an opportunity to make choices that you need to make. If you're interested in sponsoring the show, send me a DM, let me know. Everywhere from friend of the show all the way up to sponsor. So if you're interested, let me know. I'd love to have you. And we will plan to catch you next week. Thank you guys. Bye.